welcome everyone to the August meeting of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. My name is Richard Close, and we have a number of important issues we want to discuss as the summer comes to an end. Labor Day is only 2.5 weeks away. Wow. First, I'd like to have the board introduce themselves. Jules?
Yes, hi, my name is Jules Fear. I'm Vice President of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association and also Honorary Mayor of Sherman Oaks.
Okay, Jules, we're hoping for what in December?
We're hoping for our toy drive December the 5th at Gelson's Market on Van Nuys Boulevard.
Live and in person?
Live, back to where it was before the COVID.
Okay, thank you. Next, John.
Hi, I'm John Eisen. I'm a treasurer of the association. Good evening.
Okay. And next up is Maria.
Maria Calvin. I am the chair of the legislative committee.
Okay. And you're going to give us an update in a couple minutes?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Next, Nancy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Segoyan, board member and membership chair. I'd like to welcome everybody and thank our members for supporting SOHA. And if you're not a member and you live in Sherman Oaks, we really encourage you to join us. We do lots of good work. You'll hear about it. You'll hear about some updates, some really important things that SOHA has been working on for quite a while now. And anyone you know who is not a SOHA member, including you, we ask you to join, and you can go to SOHA 914, our website, which is soha914.com, and click on join SOHA. And you can also email me with questions at joinsoha@gmail.com. We are supported by our members, and we hope you help us get new members, spread the word, and support the good work we do. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Jay.
Hi, I'm Jay Weitzler. I'm secretary of the organization, and I'm also a liaison with the Buckley School. And I'd like to say a couple of things about what's going on with Buckley. They're going to open, I think, next week. And because of the COVID requirements, a lot of parents are very cautious about letting their children get on the bus and carpool and the normal things. So there's likely to be a lot more vehicle traffic in the streets, or not only on Stansbury, but the streets surrounding Stansbury and Valley Vista. They're going to try and do their best to not block driveways, and they have somebody who's going to take care of Stansbury in terms of keeping driveways open, but it's hard to know exactly what the ramifications are for the neighborhood. If you find that traffic is an issue and you might need a sign for people to pay attention to not block your driveway and something like that, contact Buckley by emailing them at communications, and that's with an S at the end, at buckley.org. Let them know what your problem is, and I'm sure they'll be happy to respond. And furthermore, they're also getting very involved by having their students assist in a Sherman Oaks cleanup on October the 13th. That's being supported not only by Buckley, but by Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council, by SOHA, by the Bid District, by the Sherman Oaks Chamber of Commerce and the council office. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in keeping our neighborhood clean, because obviously the city is not capable of doing that, to volunteer with any one of those organizations to help sweep the streets and pick up the trash and keep our neighborhood looking really good.
Okay, Jay, and you're reaching out for a potential speaker for our October meeting, correct?
With any luck, we'll have a very prominent speaker for October. Without that luck, who knows what's going to happen?
And is this
I'll fill in if need be.
And is this person a potential candidate for mayor or an actual candidate?
He is an actual candidate for mayor.
And it's not Mike Fiore, correct?
Well, I think Mike Fiore has already done his good duty.
Okay, he's spoken. Okay, next up, Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt Epstein. I'm also Vice President of Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. However, I'm not the honorary mayor. That would be Jules. I will be fielding the questions tonight for the assembly member. So if we have a very, very large turnout tonight of participants, if you have questions for the assembly member, we did receive some via email before. But if you do have questions, just tap on your Q&A part of the screen and type in your question. We will do our best to unmute you, and you can actually ask your question. I will announce that your name, and then you'll be unmuted, and you'll actually be able to ask the question, and then you'll be muted immediately so that you will not do a follow-up question, just so that we can keep it moving along.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is State Senator Henry Stern, who represents a portion of Sherman Oaks. And we've asked him to give us what's really happening, information on what's really happening in Sacramento concerning SB 9 and 10, the bills that would allow apartment buildings to be built in single-family neighborhoods. Maria will talk about that in particular a little bit later. But Henry, if you can give us an update and kind of what do we not know is happening in Sacramento on these bills?
I mean, you know a lot. I would say SOHA is one of the most informed, not just groups of homeowners, but I would say the coalition you've built is probably one of the most housing informed coalitions in the whole state. So, I mean, you probably know that it's currently, they're both alive in the assembly. The prior iteration of SB 9, which was carried by the president of the Senate, was SB 1120 that moved last year. And then there was SB 50 from Senator Wiener, which you're probably also familiar with. So these are sort of the reduxes of those pieces of legislation. Last time through the Senate, I was the only senator in the entire body not to support that legislation, the pro tems bill, which was a very difficult thing to do, especially as a fellow Democrat. And
Question, hate to interrupt, did it cost you? Did your vote or not support cost you?
I mean, things always cost. You know, these kinds of things are noticed. I don't know exactly what, you know, I wouldn't want to speculate as to exactly what ramifications it has, but, you know, I'm a big advocate on wildfire safety issues, for example. I'm also a big advocate on animal welfare issues, and I've been working on public safety issues, and none of my bills made it out at the end of last session. It was a very hard year, and all of my housing legislation this year has also died in the Senate in the first committee. We had legislation, for instance, to get some common sense back into our ADU space around setbacks. That was SB 765, died in the first committee, didn't get a hearing. SB 55, which would have limited new development in high fire zones, which to me seems like a no-brainer, died in the first committee in the Senate. So I consider myself a proud progressive, but on some of these issues, you know, I've parted ways with my leadership and have found myself on a lonelier island, but it's not as lonely these days. I think we had a number of Democrats speak up on some of these issues and really try to hone in on the affordability issue, right? Because if people like to talk about homelessness and that somehow SB 9 and SB 10 are about solving the homelessness problem, I'm of the opinion that there are very direct ways to address homelessness, which we're not pursuing right now, like aggressive investment in mental health services and drug treatment and taking the burden off of law enforcement to do that job, and maybe getting an army of, say, social workers or field psychiatrists out to your neighborhood so there's rapid response when someone's out dying on the street in front of your house. But that's really, that rationale has been used in a lot of this housing legislation, which I just have not seen the math or the analysis that shows that sort of supply side economics is going to result in prevention of homelessness Maybe it trickles down in decades to come, but that seems like a tenuous connection. So, with Senator Portantino, Senator Allen, Senator Kamlager, and a few of us in the Senate, we've been trying to figure out not just to say no to legislation, right? So I opposed 9 and 10, but also what proactive, affordable housing policy could look like. For instance, there's a $20 million cap on tax credits for affordable housing production in the state right now. So we're going to introduce a bill in the next week, actually, to lift that cap and to eliminate that cap so that developers can go out and look to do affordable housing projects where they make sense. I'm looking at rezoning commercial buildings that aren't currently in use. SB 15, I worked on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. Next up is West Hollywood Mayor Lindsay Horvath.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with the great community of Sherman Oaks. It's a place that, as a graduate of the University of Notre Dame, I get to at least share the Notre Dame connection with Sherman Oaks, been to some of those weekend games, and certainly appreciate the community, and I'm grateful to be here tonight. I'm actually running for LA County Supervisor to replace Sheila Kuehl on the board, and I'm coming to you tonight, hopefully for many, probably as an introduction, but the first of many conversations to help you get to know me and why this race is important for all of us to pay attention to, not the least of which is an issue that the senator brought up, which is homelessness. And in the city of West Hollywood, we've actually implemented some of the measures that the senator had mentioned to great success. Prior to COVID-19, we were seeing an 80% success rate getting people off the streets into housing services or both. This isn't a question of throwing more money at a broken system. This is a question of just doing the right things and putting the answers into effect. I'm on record protecting our neighborhoods and our quality of life, whether the bills that you mentioned, SB 9 and 10 or previous SB 50, because we need to protect the character of our neighborhoods while we're also focusing those new housing opportunities in our commercial corridors to keep the density out of neighborhoods, but to also create opportunities for housing to take care of the people who are living on our streets and to get them into the care that they need. Also very concerned about how we build our transportation infrastructure. I've been an advocate of the Crenshaw Northern Extension, which is an alternative, perhaps, or at least a complement to the Sepulveda Pass. And in doing that work, I personally participated in over 300 community meetings because I wouldn't have anything happen in another community that I wouldn't have happen in my own. That's the kind of service and hands-on connection I want to bring to the leadership that exists in the board. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Rob Wilcox.
Yes, thank you very much, Richard, and many of you in the audience who I've known over the years from my time serving as deputy to City Controller Laura Chick, and now for the last 8 years as Director of Community Engagement and Outreach for City Attorney Mike Feuer. I was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley. I love this city, but sometimes I don't even recognize it anymore. This is a city in crisis, and that's why I'm running to be your Los Angeles City Controller. I want to build upon the good work of Controller Ron Galperin, because the Controller's Office, one of only 3 citywide offices, is one of the most consequential in city government. The Controller is the Inspector General, the truth teller, the taxpayer's watchdog. And I want to make the City Controller's Office to LA government what 60 Minutes is to journalism, to expose and root out the problems and to hold those responsible to hold their feet to the fire. Let's look at some of the issues. Homelessness. I don't believe that we have a comprehensive strategic plan on homelessness. I'll deliver one. Corruption. We need to fix the broken development process. And also I want to look at the hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts that are handed out by political appointees. And I want to look at how the decisions are made, at how services are delivered to our neighborhoods, like police, fire, trimming trees, fixing sidewalks, paving streets. Now, if you believe that LA is on the right track, I'm not your candidate. But if you believe, like I do, that we can do better than this, please join me and go to robforcontroller.com. It's Rob, F-O-R, controller.com. I'm going to need your help. This is a change versus status quo election. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Next, our senior lead officer for the south portion of Sherman Oaks, Officer Jose Saldano.
Good evening, Richard. Thank you. Yes, I know we have a short time right now, and we have a new senior lead officer, but I'll just give you real rough numbers of what's going on. The southern portion of Sherman Oaks combined with the northern portion of Sherman Oaks, we are about up 7% in property crime. But for the most part, our violent crime, aggravated assaults has a major increase in Sherman Oaks, but we're working on that right now on trying to get those aggravated assaults a little lower. We have more personnel assigned to our northern and southern portion of Sherman Oaks to assist us in getting that crime down. But the good thing about this right now, we do have a brand new, permanent officer assigned to the northern part of Sherman Oaks, Mariana Romo, who is mostly the big portion of, and she's introduced.
You're breaking up, Jose.
I'm sorry. Officer Mariano, I'm going to introduce her. She's our Officer Mariano, so she's covering the southern portion, the northern portion of Sherman Oaks, pretty much the pink portion on top. And she's the permanent SLO for the northern portion. I'll pass it over for her.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you very much, partner, for introducing me. Again, my name is Mariana Romo. I'm the new senior lead officer for the northern part of Sherman Oaks. Just a little background about myself. My last assignment was in Woodland Hills, Canoga Park area. So I came to Van Nuys area because I grew up in the area and I have a passion for the community members that I serve with. Like my partner was saying, we do have about 6 to 7% high rate of property crimes, and a lot of them are public storage facilities and catalytic converters and underground parking lots. I am working hand in hand with our burglary detectives and our auto detectives to formulate a plan and see if there's a pattern where we can see and work with that with whatever we can. I know we do have a short time, but I am very thankful for you guys for letting me introduce myself. And I am happy to be here. I'm an energized, new, younger officer, and I'm happy to be here.
Wait a minute. You're saying that Jose is an older officer? Okay.
Scratch that, please delete that.
We'll move on. Okay, Maria.
Okay, so.
Wait a minute, let me say, I've never seen you so angry as you were today. Can you explain to the audience why you're so mad? Angry maybe is a better word.
Yeah, well, today there was the big news was that the LA City Council took up Paul Koretz's resolution to oppose SB 9 and SB 10. And they were amazing. They came through and voted to support this resolution, but our council member Rahman voted against supporting this resolution on SB 10. She felt we needed to have more housing in her district, and nobody is denying more housing, but we think there are ways to do it without ruining single family neighborhoods. And we were very upset because she has said that she doesn't want to hear people say no, she wants people with solutions, and we have been trying to get her to look at our 80-page solutions to affordable housing study that we've done, and we've yet to get a date from her. So yes, I was upset today.
Okay, and for those who are new, can you give the 1-minute explanation of 9 and 10?
Okay, so SB 9, which is the bill that allows you to split a lot and put 4 houses where 1 house used to be, and SB 10 allows 10 units of apartment units in single-family neighborhoods. They are both in the final stages of the legislative process. So tomorrow, SB 10 is scheduled for a final floor vote. It is not a firm date because these things can be shifted. If they don't have the votes they need, they can pull it. But so far, it's supposed to be for tomorrow. And SB 9 has its last committee hearing tomorrow. And then next week, we'll probably go for a full vote. So that's where they are in the assembly. And we know our Assemblymember Nazarian has opposed these bills, but we want everybody to still connect with him because he wants to hear from you. Because as you've heard from Senator Stern, it's a tough world in Sacramento. And when you're not following leadership position, they can be pretty punitive. So we need to let Nazarian know we're supporting him. Also, there are a few assembly members near us, Assemblymember Gabriel in Encino and Assemblymember Friedman in Burbank, who also support SB 10. So if you've got friends or family that live in those areas, we suggest you reach out to them. It's important for them to hear from constituents. It makes a difference.
Okay, just to clarify, so the motion today in City Council was to oppose SB 10 as well.
Right, and 9.
And our Councilwoman Rahman voted to oppose the city lobbying against 10. Am I correct?
You are correct.
And was it a close vote, or did you know?
No, there were only 2 people that voted not to support this resolution for SB 10. She was one of them. And Councilmember Cedillo was the other. And SB 9 only had one no vote, and that was Gil Cedillo. So that's where we are. Everybody else voted to support the resolution.
Okay, thank you very much. Bob Anderson?
Thanks, Richard. I've got a couple of topics to talk to everybody about. First is redistricting. You may have heard that this is going on. It's going on at the state level, the county level, and the city level. And SOHA has been making recommendations on all of these. The biggest one we're interested in right now is city redistricting. And you may have all heard also that redistricting data, the census data, is late this year. And that's true. The real census data won't be out till the end of September. But luckily, some pretty good data in an older format came out last Thursday. And this morning, the city released some preliminary data, and we've analyzed it, and it looks like the valley's in pretty good shape to stay with just about the same number of districts that we have right now, maybe a little bit of a gain versus the rest of the city. And we've made some pretty strong recommendations to the commission. They're having a meeting tomorrow night. I'm going to speak there again. And so we'll keep you posted on what's going on. It's a complex process that will be done not till the end of the year. The other thing I want to talk to you about is Metro. You know about the Sepulveda Pass project, the transit through there. You may also have seen notice that Metro had some meetings on their toll roads or express lanes. The last one of those was today. I know Maria's mad about SB 9 and SB 10. I'm mad about Metro. Folks, I'll just tell you the basic truth. They just don't pay any attention to what the public is saying. They say, oh, thank you for your comment. They never answer it. Thank you for your question. They never answer it. We've asked 70 questions and sent those comments in. They've never answered one of them in 4 years. And then what do? We tell them, what idiot would put an elevated train above Sepulveda Boulevard? I mean, you'd have to be, crawl out of the sewer to do that. And what do they say? Oh, we're going to study it further. We asked them to cancel it. They ignored us. So they're on my you-know-what list right now. And I'm working very closely with some people in Bel Air who are also extremely upset with Metro. They're not telling you the truth. They're not being transparent, and they're not being fair to the Valley or the whole Santa Monica Mountains area. And we're on top of it, and we'll keep you posted about what's going on. Thanks,
So,
Richard.
okay, so Bob, is it correct that there's a law firm that's been retained to do further research and analysis as to what that Metro is doing? Is it, without naming names, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and just to clarify, they want to take away the HOV or the carpool lane through the Sepulveda Pass and make it a toll lane. Is that correct?
That's one of the options. Couple of the options: take away the carpool lane, replace it with an HOV lane. Another option takes away the HOV lane and replace, I said HOV before, replace it with a toll lane. Another option takes away the HOV carpool lane and replaces it with 2 toll lanes. To do that, they have to make the lanes on the 405 a foot narrower than they are for cars. Now, where the trucks go, they say they're going to keep them the width they are now. But if you're driving in your car, they're going to squeeze you down a foot narrower. If you've ever driven up that hill, I haven't in 4 years because I stay away from it. But you're not going to like narrower lanes.
True. Thank you very much. Okay, next is our main speaker, our assembly member. And before I pass it on to Adrin, if you could, number one, tell us how you're going to vote on SB 9 and 10. Number two, if you could tell us what's going to happen is the $75 billion surplus at the state level, plus there's a $25 billion funds coming from Washington. How is that, in your opinion, how is that going to be able to benefit Sherman Oaks? With that, I'll turn it over to our Assemblyman Adrin Nazarian.
Thanks, Richard. Let me just change the format so I'm not just looking at myself on the screen. Okay. It's great to be with everyone. I do wish that the screen captured every attendant as well so that I would see familiar faces, but it's wonderful to see all of you. Bob, Jules, Matt, Jay, John, Nancy, Richard, Rob, Maria, and Jeff, of course. And Maria and Jeff, thank you for the study that you did provide. I have had a chance to look at it briefly, and so is my staff as well. Wanted to also thank the senior lead officers, Jose, as well as Mariana. Welcome, Mariana, to our community. And to answer your question, I like consistency, Richard. So I stood up and spoke against and voted against AB 1120 last year. I plan on doing the same this year on SB 9, I believe. Is it 9? Yes, this year it's SB 9. In fact, I would say add SB 8 to SB 9 and 10. Even though, quite candidly, SB 10 is not as challenging as SB 9 because SB 9 is just a bill that allows the authority for a city to take advantage of that tool. The easiest way is to make sure that it doesn't pass so that the city doesn't even have that tool. But at the end of the day, every city has its own needs and challenges. So if LA doesn't want to accept it, it does not have to adopt it. But other places like San Francisco can adopt and utilize it as a means of increasing their housing stock. So I think at least 10 allows that advantage. 9 outright, I think, decimates our planning and zoning code section for the city. And I don't think that's the right way of approaching things. I think it's better to figure out ways of incentivizing more development. I think it's important to figure out how we can pay to incentivize more affordable units. I think we need to do a better job at maintaining the existing stock of affordable units that we have, including rent control units. In fact, I had a bill on that in my first term of office in 2014. I passed AB 2222 that didn't get a lot of attention at the time, but it was one of those bills that actually had a tremendous impact on preserving our rent-controlled units. Because what would end up happening, especially in places like Sherman Oaks, Valley Village, Studio City, where where there are apartment buildings that are now built 50, 60 years ago that now are rent-controlled buildings, but aren't optimal size for the area that they occupy. What would happen was spec developers would come in, purchase that piece of property. If it was only 10 apartment units, and they know, they do the math that they can develop 40 units there, plus take advantage of the bonus density programs that the state offers, they could get upwards of maybe about 44, 45 units and only provide 3 units or 4 units as affordable. Whereas previously the 10 existing units were all affordable because they were all rent controlled. And so what would end up happening was we would introduce more units into the area, which is fine. We do need more units, but we would do it at the cost of also lessening the number of affordable units. So my bill back in 2014 said that it's fine if you want to purchase a property and take advantage of building more units, and also taking advantage of the bonus density programs that the state provides, but you need to maintain the original number of rent-controlled units. So there are common sense ways where we can both protect our affordable units, as well as make sure that we're enhancing the number of market units available so that we're not seeing staggeringly high prices for cost of living. So I hope that answers your question, and I'm happy to talk more about 8, 9, and 10, but I'm as the bills are written now, and as they're going to be appearing in their form currently on the floor of the Assembly, I will not be supporting these bills. And I've stated that case in numerous other meetings with both groups that are in support of the bills as well as opposed to the bill. A couple of things that I just wanted to highlight include, last year, this has been kind of a very interesting, tumultuous, I guess it becomes very trite to use the word interesting, but it's just been may we live in interesting times, kind of a scenario where, a year and a half ago, almost 9 months ago, our entire focus was homelessness and housing. And as we were getting ready to start 2020 with continuing our efforts in homelessness and housing, we were hit with the COVID-19 virus health concerns, which became a global pandemic, which led to closures, which then led to job losses and economic impacts, which then led to seeing the failures of programs that are meant to protect citizens and residents at a time of job loss completely being dismantled. So EDD, the debacle of EDD has been horrendous, and it still continues. And you would think that given the lessons learned from 10 years ago, we would have been able to avoid a lot of the mistakes that were made right now by EDD. But unfortunately, also the way the pandemic happened and how the closures hit overnight, we sustained a 22% job loss, literally in a matter of weeks. And so it was an overwhelming number for EDD to be able to sustain. And so it's part of the reason why it also made some tremendous mistakes. But given all of these circumstances, this year itself, when we great deal of expectation that the budget was going to be horrific between how well the markets performed, which is really the ironic part of how our state government works, by the way. We were facing tremendous job loss last year. So you would think that income tax has been reduced. Money coming into our coffers has gone down. But our budget is so market dependent so that when a very few individuals do extremely well in capital gains, our coffers get filled very quickly. And so with the enormous transactions of wealth taking shape in the marketplace and the capital gains that have been realized, many people did in the upper brackets did very well. And so our budget turned from red to black instantly from last December to this year's January. And it continued actually surprising us. That coupled with the $27 billion coming in from the federal government, which Richard also asked that I'm going to get to, created the opportunity for us to backfill a lot of different programs that have been either cut in the past or were lacking the support necessary. So let me give you an example. We've made tremendous cuts to program areas that aren't protected. In-home care services, for example, IHSS, which benefits our seniors and elderly, is a program that does not enjoy any protection. So when programs don't enjoy protection, such as education, K through 12 education, right? Proposition 19 protects K through 12 funding, but nothing is protecting IHSS. So when the economy goes down, one of the first programs to be cut is IHSS services. Well, when IHSS services get cut, many of our seniors end up not getting the services and supports necessary to be able to provide for themselves, especially amongst them, the disabled or disadvantaged who may not have the life savings necessary, which most of our seniors don't, in order to be able to allow them to live somewhat of a comfortable, regular life. So when you look at where California is headed, and I want to emphasize this point, when you look at California's population trends, currently, Californians age 60 plus make up 13% of the state, which has grown, by the way, from just about a couple of years ago. It's grown from 11% to 13%. So the trajectory is there. It's expected that within the next 12 to 14 years, that number, Californians 60 years and plus, will grow from 13% upwards to 25%. 1 out of every 4 Californian is going to be age 60 plus, which means that when we make cuts in IHSS services, when we make cuts in senior nutrition, senior meals, senior health-related programs, there's going to be greater devastation in the growing population of the aging. Now, let's not forget also what's going on with all the healthcare advancements. People are living longer. So if cancer and heart disease aren't the reasons why our elderly are passing away or middle-aged individuals aren't passing away, and they pass those years where they would be impacted by heart disease or cancer, by the time they're in their 80s, maybe even 90s, God willing, like my father is, they start experiencing neurodegenerative diseases, whether it's ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, any form of various dementia. Obviously, none of these neurodegenerative diseases also have a cure. All medicine right now can do is help in some ways elongate life to some extent, even though the quality of life deteriorates rapidly during that time. So when you look at our growing aging population, coupled with the fact that we're really not making some of the investments necessary, coupled with the fact that these neurodegenerative diseases that have no cure are going to cost us even more to care for people, we're we need to be very mindful about how we're going about making investments in long-term care. So I bring that up because this was a year where, because we had some significant funding availability, we restored IHSS funding, fully funded back to where it was up until 10 years ago. If you may recall, 10 years ago, we made cuts to IHSS. I wasn't here back then, but during the last economic downturn, IHSS was cut by 7%. That number of hours were cut by 7%. That was significant. That means a certain level of quality of life, maybe even pertaining to death and, life or death for many seniors. Another step we took was making significant investments in senior nutrition. One of the things that this pandemic demonstrated was to what extent we are ill-prepared to deal with preparation and delivery of meal programs for our seniors, and to what extent the programs were already lacking, let alone how much of a greater need developed over the course of this last year and a half. So on an ongoing basis, we made a one-time investment of $75 million. On an ongoing basis, there's going to be $35 million towards senior nutrition. Same time, we're increasing certified nursing assistant programs because of the shortages for skilled nursing facilities. Skilled nursing facilities is another area. You'll look at the devastating impacts of COVID. 30%, over 30% of the deaths in the country came from less than 1% of the population. That population resides in skilled nursing facilities. These are just horrific statistics where, when you look at what country it's happening in, you expect that to happen in a third world country. You don't expect that to happen in the United States. Not with our medical capabilities, not with our technology capabilities, and not with the vast resources that we have available. So these have all been tremendous teaching opportunities for all of us. We eliminated the Medi-Cal asset test for seniors. Many seniors don't realize that by the time they get to a certain age, and if they don't qualify for Medi-Cal, they're one hospital stay away from losing their homes. I mean, some of the things that we've set up over the years have been so devastating to middle-class seniors and elderly, where what ends up happening is it forces a lot of seniors to want to get rid of their home, or turn it over to their kids so that they don't have any assets anymore, so they can qualify for Medi-Cal. It's a means of survival, but many elderly also did not appreciate the fact that they needed to be dishonest about something like that, which is not being dishonest, but taking those steps in order to protect themselves. So this was something very important that needed to happen so that it does not erode senior savings. And I can go, I want to just highlight maybe a couple more things. And to be honest with you, I think it's better if I stop and then we allow for question and answer. A couple of things that I just want to really highlight that I think are going to be very critical for us. On the education front, for years now, I've been working on the Children's Savings Account. It's basically a program that every child born in California will get a very small investment made to their name in a 529 plan. If you're familiar with the 529 plans, those are the college set-aside funds where I'm investing in a 529 plan where I put in a couple of $100s for each of my children on a monthly basis, so that by the time they're 18, those monthly investments, along with the growth in the market, will allow them to be able to absorb the costs of college and college expenses. Well, a lot of families do not utilize this. If you were to look at statistics, less than 5% of California families actually had a 529 plan, which is embarrassing. If we want to invest in our future, we got to make sure that it starts at a young age and our kids know that they're invested in, so that they do pursue a college career. And if it's not college career, it's some form of a technical trade, vocational trade, something that enhances their future opportunities in the workforce arena.
Adrin, I know that Matt has a lot of questions, so if you want to, kind of.
So I'll just wrap it up by saying that several years ago, I worked on a bill that ended up being adopted as part of the budget that would set this program, but it wasn't funded at that time. It was only funded at about $25 per account. This year, we were able to finance it up to $1.8 billion. And for the next 20 years, we're going to be able to make significant investments for the next generation of California children. So everyone knows that if they do want to pursue a college career or a career enhancing opportunity, that they have the opportunity to do so. So with that, I'll stop and I'm happy to answer questions.
Matt?
Okay, great. So we had quite a few questions popped up when you talked about the EDD making a mistake. Quite a few. The last number I heard, it was like $31 billion was fraudulently paid. And I think those numbers have even gone up. So the first question is actually from.
That's only what we know.
That's what we know, exactly. So Jay, you should be unmuted. Did you want to ask the Assembly member question? Jay,
Jay, unmute yourself.
There we go. Assembly member, I was just wondering what is being done to recover all this. We've heard about these terrible amounts of money, and we've heard little or nothing about the actual efforts and how that's turning out about recovering however many $1 billion, which is just an incomprehensible, whatever the number is incomprehensible to us. So what is being done?
Jay, I don't think you're gonna. Let me answer it this way, because it's very. Your question is more focused on the law and order aspect of it. So let me answer it a different way, Jay. And I hope I don't disappoint you with this. My current concern and the biggest concern is to make sure that those that have not been paid and legitimately are still waiting to be paid, those cases are resolved. The damage has already been done with what's gone out. And we are going to go and slowly recover all of those dollars back. It will happen. It always does. It might take a year. It might take 5 years, but it does happen. I have complete faith that the restoration and the restitution of those funds will be realized at some point. Maybe not entirely, but overwhelming majority of it will come back. The real challenge, though, right now is that between all the forbearances, all the delayed rental payments, all the continuing starved needs that we have, it's still very critical to me that we make sure that those people who have not been paid first get paid. We can always go back and recover and ensure that there's restitution in getting back the dollars. And there's efforts right now already. The Department of Justice is already working on it. They've already started recovering some money. Slowly, you're going to be reading more and more about this. This is not going to, no one's going to let this go. The worst thing is to try to cheat on taxes or government dollars. You might be successful for some time, but eventually it's going to get caught up. And so I think a lot of these people who engaged in those activities ended up making a lot of mistakes and are slowly going to be pursued.
Okay.
If I might, Matt, just with a quick follow-up. We won't get into what percentage you can get back and all that, but do you know of any efforts in the EDD to prevent this from happening again?
The system that was put into place, actually, ID Me, works relatively well, and that's helped. But unfortunately, it was a little too late and didn't really help when it was necessary. But currently, the efforts put into place towards the beginning of this year have substantially slowed down any of that activity.
Okay, so another question is from following up on what you had talked about as far as the elder population growing in California. Is from a Jay Johnston. He's not on the he's not as on the call, so I'll ask the question. A lot of seniors are moving out of California right now because of overtaxation. But if your numbers are correct as far as the amount, if it's 25% of the population in another 20 years, and companies are moving out of California because of tax incentives and different reasons, where's the money going to come from? I know right now that there is the rainy day fund because the federal government bailed out of the states, but where's the money going to come from for all these services, for all these people, homeless, unemployed, and seniors?
It's very loaded. That's very loaded. So let me try to bifurcate each one and give an answer. First of all, the federal government didn't bail us out. We already had a reserve, Matt. We had stocked up a reserve of about $25 billion. The reality is, though, if you look at our history and if you look at 2009, 2010, and the budget hole that was left in our budget at that time our budget was roughly only about 100 billion, and we had a 22 billion hole. So that's why a lot of major cuts were made. And we ended up selling bonds in order to pay for programs, which you never do. You never pay current day services on a long-term bond, but that's what we ended up having to do. But fortunately, with the growth in the market, we've also been able to pay off a lot of those bonds. And by actually reducing a lot of our social service programs, which had a devastating impact on a lot of our disabled community members and our seniors also. So, so we already had a reserve in place. We've actually helped expand that reserve now, where I think one of the questions early on was about the $25 billion that we're going to owe the federal government. That has to do with the unemployment insurance. The reality is so many states owe the federal government on the unemployment insurance that it's not something we need to think about paying right this moment, because we're not the only ones that the federal government is going to pursue. In fact, potentially if you were to look at it in a distribution of percentages, we're probably not one of the worst off states either. So it's just a matter of time for us to be able to pay that back. But first things first, I think it's critical that we figure out how we make sure the homelessness component doesn't become even more challenging because of the number of people that are currently in forbearance, or the number of renters who are in arrears in their payments. And unfortunately, even though we've passed multiple legislation at this point with billions of dollars in order to provide for renters to be able to become current in their payments, a lot of the program rollout has been stalling. And there's billions of dollars still sitting. I mean, just here in Los Angeles, only several $1 million has been paid out. At the entire state level, only a few $100 million out of billions of dollars have been paid out. And because this is something that requires both the renter as well as the landlord to come to an agreement and fill out the forms on both of their ends in order to for those payments to be dispensed. So I was trying to answer all of the questions. I think I left something out. On the fact that you said businesses are leaving, I do disagree with the assumption that businesses are leaving California. If you look at statistics, Matt, there are as many businesses, if not more, opening up in California as there are businesses leaving. So it's really a wash. In fact, there's a net positive in the number of businesses that are opening up. If you were to tell me about a certain migration of middle-class individuals, I'd agree with you on that. I think there are seniors and certain folks that are coming to an age where they're looking at retirement that I've spoken to a few that are that have been leaving. At the end of the day, I think, it's a matter of priorities, how we move forward. If we want to have a resilient, sustainable state that takes care of its infrastructure, takes care of its roads, takes care of its water, makes sure that it's a livable place. And let's look at Los Angeles. I've said this to all of you before. You know, right here in San Fernando Valley alone had a population of roughly about 25, 30,000 in the census tracts of 1920 and 1930. You know, we're now at a 1.8 billion population. I'm sorry, 1.8 million population. And when it's easy to get billions and millions mixed when you're talking about the state budget, especially, unfortunately. But you know, we went from roughly 30,000 in the early 30s to 1.8 million in the same space without really a very good plan in place that allowed us to grow in a sustainable place. That's one of the reasons why we have the housing issues that we have right now, because we don't have a sustainable transportation mechanism that allows people the alternative to having cars. And so, you know, you can live far away from your work, but if you have if you have a good rail system, if you have a sophisticated rail system, you wouldn't have to be dependent on a vehicle, which reduces costs tremendously. Less insurance, first of all, less car payments, less insurance, less natural resources such as gas in order to continue and then maintenance and everything else.
So thank you. And that was not my question. So I know you said me, but it wasn't coming from me. I was asking the question, but
sure.
Okay. And also for the next, we have a bunch of questions. So
I'll try to keep it short.
Thank you, Adrin. So the next question asker is, hopefully her phone is, or her line is unmuted, is Nancy. Go ahead and ask your question if your phone is unmuted. And then after that's going to be Maria Calvin.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Assembly Member. We appreciate your being here with us tonight.
Also, Nancy, that means you got to shorten your question too.
I am going to get to the point, Matt. This is about,
Taskmaster.
I know, that's another subject, but anyway. This question is about Van Nuys Airport and the proposed flight paths. I know people south of the boulevard have organized and they've been very vocal and they've suffered with a lot of flight noise. They have ostensibly been asking for higher, more widely dispersed flight paths, but I've been hearing a lot of residents of the northern part of Sherman Oaks who aren't so sure that's what is going to be the solution. I've recently looked at some maps of the proposal, and the WP3, I think that's waypoint 3, for eastbound flights coming from Van Nuys goes right over the 101 freeway. And it goes, which is already, residents around the 101 are already impacted by noise and pollution from the freeway. And they do not, now I don't have all the information yet, but I'm going to ask you what light you can shed on this and how involved you've been and what your feedback will be, because it appears, and many, many residents of Sherman Oaks are fearful that while we understand the concerns of the southern residents of Sherman Oaks, we don't want the noise just simply pushed to the northern part of Sherman Oaks, because, and especially the part that's already impacted due to the proximity of the freeway. So we're looking for a fair solution, higher, wider flight paths, and it does not appear that
Nancy, what is your question?
So I'm asking the Assembly Member if he can shed some light on what he knows about the proposal, and if—
Okay, so Assembly Member, do you have a—
Oh, man. Yeah,
So
I think I made my point. Yeah.
I got it, Nancy. Thank you. So very briefly speaking, first of all, just so everyone understands, this is something that is done at the federal level. This isn't something that I have a say-so. I can advocate, I can push for an issue, I can try to help organize communities to speak in one united voice. The challenge with that is, just in my own district, I can't have a united consensus on this. The northern part of the district, which you look at the thoroughfares of Sherman Way and Van Owen, those are the flight paths for Burbank Airport. All the incoming flights that end up settling into Burbank Airport are utilize the Sherman Way or Van Owen flight path, or depending on the wind factor of the day, they might go a little southbound and over the hills, come in and make a turn and land. I do believe in a even distribution of takeoffs so that the same one narrow area isn't devastated. So the more distribution there is, the more the noise factor will be spread all over the place, not focused in one place. Initially, when this issue had come up, I had written a letter to the federal government citing a very small, obscure issue that protected wildlife in the hills. And based on the merits of protecting the wildlife, I was asking for the federal government to reconsider some of its plans. So those were the quick steps that I took initially. And then after that, many community activists organized and the attorneys got involved. And right now, this issue has somewhat slowed down.
If you
Okay.
would jump
Okay.
back in and advocate for higher, wider flight paths, it would really be appreciated. Thank you.
And Matt, we have about 10, 15 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So Maria Calvin's up next, and then after that, Jeff, if you can unmute Lorna Boyd.
Hi, Assemblymember Nazarian. My question is, with the long-term drought that we're facing, how do we balance between population growth that we need to have and our water limitations? How do we deal with that?
We pick up where the federal government failed to address this issue. Back in the 80s, the federal government had established the super funds, as you may recall, in order to help clean up our, among many other things, our underground, our polluted underground water facilities. In California, the San Fernando Valley is sitting on the largest naturally existing underground water storage facility. It's the second biggest one in the entire country. And so it provides enough underground water for us to be able to be 40%, maybe even 50% sustainable. There may be engineers and water experts that might be able to provide greater data on that among those of you who are listening. But from all the work I've done with the Department of Water and Power, currently, our underground water usage is only about 9%, 11% of our entire water usage, which means that the rest of the 90% or 89% has to come from either the north or from Colorado. So when that happens, you can imagine we're not operating from a position of strength. We're extremely weak and vulnerable and dependent on others. That's not the position I want to be in. So I've worked on legislation that would allow for what is called a rate reduction bond, which would allow the DWP to pair up with other water agencies and create new JPAs. JPAs are joint power authorities. These are joint power authorities are governments of their own. When a new government is established, it could sell bonds, but because it has no liability, it sells bonds at a much greater discount. And so what ends up happening is, if we will have a several $billion project of, for example, establishing filtration programs to clean up our underground water, we're paying $200 to $300 million less in interest over the life of these bonds. I passed that legislation in my first term of office so that we would come up with at least one weapon in the arsenal of addressing these issues. And so based on that now, there are 3 projects that have been going forward. And one of them is going to be opening up anytime soon, actually, in northeast San Fernando Valley. 3 different DWP water, underground water cleanup program facilities so that we can, on a speedy basis, start cleaning up the decades of pollution that's amassed in our underground storage water. By the way, don't forget, folks, we have 118 pumps throughout the city collecting water from our from underground. But there's so much pollution and contamination that 70% of these pumps are not working. In fact, only 30% of them can work intermittently at different times, because when one pump is sucking up water, the pollution starts gravitating towards that well. And so we don't want to, DWP is avoiding to collect that water, because if it does, it doesn't have the capability to clean it up. So what it does is it shuts that pump and then starts using another pump. That's how it's been managing for the last several decades. Time has come to be able to have a reliable source of underground water. So we need to clean the groundwater, which is going to take probably another 20, 30, maybe 40 years in order to clean up. But we needed to make the investment to do it now. So
Okay. All right.
That's
Thank
one
you.
answer.
All right. Lorna Boyd is on, and then after that is going to be Jeff Calvin. Lorna, you should be unmuted. Lorna, you want to ask your question?
She's unmuted, Matt, but I think there she is.
Yes, thank you, Bobby. I know you started to read my email. I sent an email to him earlier. Assemblyman, I want to know if any of the money that we are spending toward solving our homelessness situation is being earmarked for building institutions for those who are mentally ill and really can't accept any kind of housing that we would offer them. We need to rebuild all of the asylums that we tore down decades ago, and so these people have a place where they can live and be supervised.
Yeah.
Is that being done?
Homelessness is an extremely complicated issue area. I know that it's very difficult because we're all living, you buy a house, you make an investment in your community, you're committed to raising your kids in a certain place, and you see people living in these dire circumstances. The reality is that we've been living with this circumstance for well over 50 years. But prior to this last decade, it was all hiding in downtown LA area. Yeah. And so as downtown started to, development started to take hold in downtown area, it started pushing the problem westward. And so it came into the LA suburbs and communities. And so now that it's for the last several years that it's been in front of us, we've started to actually deal with the issue. And the problem is, because we haven't really dealt with the issue in all sincerity, well, we didn't even have the mechanisms or infrastructure to really deal with it. We didn't have the number of beds necessary. We didn't have the mental health capabilities. We didn't have the addiction related capabilities. There were so many things missing to make it a very effective attack on dealing with the homeless population. By the way, this goes back to 2 questions ago when Matt asked about homelessness as well. One of the things that I've been advocating for also, and this is something that we need to talk with our federal partners, homelessness, to me, the need to address it is a federal issue. The reason why I say that is, while most of the homeless folks are from California itself, we can say that between 20 to 30% of the homeless individuals come from out of state. And it's natural, it's an issue of geography and topography. When you look at the fact that there's not a lot of homeless in Minneapolis, not a lot of homeless in Boston, not a lot of homeless in colder parts of United States, it's because they migrate over towards the warmer areas and eventually find themselves in California, because we also, amongst the warmer states, we provide the services in order to help them get them back on their feet. So if we're going to be taking the lion's share of the social services for homeless, then we need the federal government to also step up and provide us the funding we need in order to be able to address this issue that we are for most of the country. Either that, or we do what New York does, which is aggressively ship homeless individuals back to the states that they come from, to their next of kin. And that's what New York does very effectively. But the problem with that also is that people will end up finding their way back to California as well. So you need to think about a longer term sustainable solution. And the longer term solution is making sure that we have transitional facilities, again, transitional, so that we capture people, we give them the services necessary. And by the way, shelter is a small part, should be the small part of the cost. The bigger cost should always be the services, the addiction-related services, mental health services, reintroduction back into society, into the workforce services, all of those programs that get people back on their feet. That's, to me, the 70 to 80% of where the dollars need to be spent on homelessness, not on the shelters.
Matt, this will be the last question.
Okay, Richard's been giving me the hook for a little bit of time. So Adrin, we actually have 2 more questions. So I'm gonna ignore that I just heard Richard say last question. So
he does it all the time. He does it all the time.
Well, we've got 2 more people up in queue. So we've got Jeff Calvin, who's going to ask a very quick question, and I know Adrian's going to address it very quickly. And then after that, we have Leslie Mayo, who will be unmuted for the last question, and she's going to ask her question, which is 2 paragraphs in 1 sentence. Go ahead, Jeff.
Adrin, great seeing you again. Metro has selected 5 Sepulveda Transit Corridor concepts for study and environmental review. Bechtel proposes heavy rail trains underground on the west side, but raised tracks running down Sepulveda Boulevard from Valley Vista north to Raymer. This will be extremely noisy and take away driving lanes on Sepulveda Boulevard and destroy the communities of Sherman Oaks and Van Nuys. Can the state withhold funds from the Sepulveda Transit Corridor project if Metro selects such a disastrous concept?
Sorry, I don't know if I missed something. Was that a question or a statement?
No, the question is, can the state withhold funds from Metro if they go ahead with such a destructive project?
Yes and no. Most of the funding that comes to Metro is either federal or prop funding coming from our sales taxes. And then, of course, whatever measures that have been passed also to continue increasing funds for them. The main state funding that comes to them is SB1 funding. SB1 passed in 2016, and there was about 16% funding for rail and transit in SB1, which would allow for complement funding to go towards to complement current transit and rail capital improvement. So it's not a great portion of the funding necessary. So that's not going to make or break. I think what's critical is that we've been doing this as an LA delegation between the Assembly members and the Senate. We are holding Metro accountable, and we are pushing them to tell us exactly how they're going to be able to accomplish what they want to accomplish, and how they're going to prioritize what it is that we as legislators want to see. Is one of the things that when I first was elected, wanted to work on was to make sure that we're establishing greater connectivity amongst our rail lines. The fact that we had the Orange Line bus system, because there had been legislation passed 20 some years ago, not allowing for above grade rail, was absurd. You know, you at least at some point, you need to allow for any which way of establishing a rail line, whether above ground or underground, in order to strengthen your transportation mechanism system. So my preference is always to be underground, but there's certain challenging realities also with that. You know, in Sherman Oaks area, you're dealing with a lot of liquefaction issues. You're dealing with seismic related issues. So, without getting into the details of what would work best, I would tell you that my first priority always is to have rail be underground. Very similarly, I want to underground all of our utilities. I hate the fact that, in the second largest city of the superpower of the world, our electricity delivery and phone line delivery mechanism is still 100 years old. We have, wires all over the city instead of all of that being undergrounded. So my first preference would be to underground all utilities, and looking at transportation also as a utility. My preference would be to underground that, but it does raise the cost significantly for Metro, which means that if they spend all of that money in one part of the city, there isn't going to be enough funds to then, if they spend all of the money in one part of the county, they won't be able to expend it in other projects in other parts of the county.
All right, last question, Leslie. Okay, she's not, she's being, oh, there you are.
Okay, yes, my question has to do with the SB 9 and 10. And as we know, over the course of the last few years, we've had many iterations of these particular, they've had different numbers, but they've all basically been the same. We recognize, as citizens, we recognize the problems of homelessness and affordable housing. And yet every iteration of these bills has never mandated affordable housing as part of the whole program, which makes me just feel like the developers in this city have a stranglehold on development, and that we can't see clear to provide housing for the people who need it. What do what is your take on that?
So Leslie, I appreciate what you said. That's been one of my concerns as well. But let me, just for devil's argument's sake, first of all, you got to look at it from the perspective of the proposers and why they're proposing this path. They're looking at a place like Los Angeles, for example, and to what extent Los Angeles is built out. How else are you going to be able to address the issue? And a very easy solution is to subdivide a lot of the properties. Okay, when you're looking at things from a 30,000 feet view, that might be a good solution to you. To me, that's not a good solution, because I think that devastates a lot of working class communities. In fact, I think it actually will even have a more devastating impact on a place like the San Fernando Valley than any other place in LA County or even in the state. When you look at the way the San Fernando Valley has been planned, not very well, unfortunately, but the way it's planned and sprawled, if you introduce something like this, if you implement a program like this, that, as you said, doesn't even also benefit affordable component, just market rate, all it's going to do is tax our existing utility infrastructure, roadways being part of that, even more. It doesn't do anything to provide for parking. I think it's what is SB 10 completely gets rid of any type of a CEQA requirement. So it both will have environmental. It might even help in the short term, because what these bills are trying to aim to do is expand market rate housing, which we're in great need of. By the way, when you look at the statistics, when you look at the fact that 20 years ago, we were developing roughly 220,000 units in the state of California, 220,000 roughly units of housing in California. Now we're developing 80,000 units, almost. We've declined by a third, to a third, not by a third, to a third, while the population growth continues to go up, right? When you're seeing that trend, all that's going to do is put greater pressure point on per unit housing, which is unsustainable, because we all want our children to live next to us. So we do need to look at ways of expanding housing, but we can do it in a smart way. We're sitting on Van Nuys Boulevard, Sepulveda Boulevard. We're sitting on these areas. You look at Van Nuys between Magnolia and Roscoe. You can count on one hand how many buildings there are that are above 2 stories. That's absolutely absurd to me. Van Nuys Boulevard has 4 lanes going north, 4 lanes coming south, and a very rich median that's used by the auto dealers. If you were to rezone the entirety of Van Nuys Boulevard, allow for 6, 7 stories of apartment buildings with commercial at the bottom level, with a good transit plan in place along the median, underground, whatever we decide to go with, you will have a whole new area burgeoning, which would allow for people to find affordable market rate housing on top of the necessary required affordable units, but it will keep the market rate level ones affordable as well, rather than now. I mean, folks, I don't know how many of you are looking at housing, but it's devastating what's happened in the last several years, especially in this last year during the pandemic, where we lost 22% of our workers lost their jobs. Our housing prices went through the roof. I feel like just in the last 6 months, homes have gained another 100 to 150,000 in value. It's absurd what's going on. Part of it is market forces at nature, because we have in Los Angeles, our properties have been undervalued for a long time. We saw that happen in New York as well, starting 10 years ago, and ours is happening now as well. But New York prices came down, ours haven't come down, which means that we do need more stock, housing stock, but 9 and 10 don't address the issue.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I know we're over a little bit. Bob, what is the process for people to see this on video? Tell their friends, neighbors.
Sure, Richard. In less than a couple of days, we will have the video of this meeting posted on YouTube.
And how do people see it?
You go to YouTube and you type in SOHA community meeting on the search, and you will find all of our meetings all of our Zoom meetings will be on there, and a lot of meetings back many years that are kind of fun to watch.
Thank you. With that, we'll wrap it up in a second, but I want to thank the Assemblymen for taking time out this evening to meet with us. Our next meeting is the 3rd Wednesday in September. We're going to focus on crime in the San Fernando Valley. The speaker is the Deputy Chief of the LAPD, who is in charge of all police activity in the San Fernando Valley. We look forward to meeting with him and seeing all of you next month, 3rd Wednesday in September. With that, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.